All right, guys. Welcome. This is Fast Mass Bodybuilding. I'm Dylan, your host. This is Dusty and Josh, your other host here. We are coaches of Fast Mass Bodybuilding, and we are here to help you build muscle, transform your life, and just ultimately achieve that highest version of yourself that we're all trying to strive for, right? We're always trying to be the best we can be. So today we're diving in specifically on the row, how to fix your row, how to build your back, right? And what leads to that and what is some repercussions of that as well. So there's a big problem that I see. I see in the gym, just from observing, and I hear from my clients, they always talk about how to build your lats. I just can't seem to build my lats. I can't connect with it. And even times myself throughout my training, I've had issues where I just couldn't connect with my lat. I couldn't really feel it, and it just kind of felt shrink wrapped to my body almost, So I want to lay out this problem and then give you guys a solution as well. So that way you can start building healthier, stronger lats and stronger back. So that way you can also start to develop a full symmetrical physique. And not just that, but we're going to talk about the performance aspect of it, the recovery aspect, the injury prevention aspect of it as well. We're going to break it all down in here. So guys, Dusty and Josh here, what do you guys, we're going to talk about, let's dive in kind of on the anatomy and the structure of the lat. Why do we have these big issues where we just can't connect with the lat? What brings to your mind in that? How can we solve that problem?
We can just kind of start with like anatomy. I feel like the lat is much larger than people realize. Like it starts way up high, kind of near like the bottom of your neck. And so, the movements, its function of the lat is just shoulder extension, bringing that arm backwards. So that extension movement is the function of the lat. And I feel like most people may not get into that movement as much as they need. Maybe the elbow is bent too far. They're using too much shoulder, but that extension of your arm is the function. And I think just keeping that in mind throughout your movements will really help just with isolating the lat.
That's good. That's okay. So the lat, you're saying the lat runs all the way up, right? No, it's not just right here. It's not just in the immediate back. I know a lot of times when I see people row and they're always kind of pulling with their shoulder, moving that way. Right. So you're saying that's what we need to do is kind of load that lat and pull that shoulder down, right?
Right. So like, especially with like rows, I see people row with their arm bent and they're just really focusing on bringing that arm up when you're really trying to extend it. So, I mean, you don't even have to bend the elbow as much as people do like with rows. You're really trying to just bring that arm backwards as far as you can. And that's kind of where you're going to feel that pinch in your shoulder blade. And that's what's going to help isolate those lats a little bit more.
That's huge. That pinch in your shoulder blade. I like that. Yeah. Do you have anything to add into that, Josh? What would you say?
Yeah, I mean, Dusty's right in terms of kind of the anatomy of the lat and the function of it. For me and my clients, I shouldn't say a different approach, but I have them like from a performance aspect. I tend to have my clients really focus on engaging their core because the core is what connects the upper body to the lower body. And so therefore, because of what we know based on what Dusty said, if I can get my clients to engage their core, embrace their abs better, more efficiently and longer throughout those extended sets of 12, 15, in the case of bodybuilding, upwards of 20 reps.
Yeah.
If our core is engaged properly, then every movement, whether it's upper body or lower body, that muscle group is going to function the way it needs to and optimally. And therefore, kind of combining everything that we just said, if you can brace your core properly and get the lat to engage the way it needs to, then whether it's for performance gains or physique gains or strength gains, you're going to be able to build your lats stronger, healthier, more symmetrical, based on or because of we're able to brace our abs properly and for an extended amount of time.
That's huge right there. Because I know doing exercises, it's definitely something to think about. Sometimes I even get lost in it and I'm almost noticing my rib cage and my whole upper body start to move with it. So what do you think will be the best way to initiate that, to brace the core before you start? How should you set your body up?
I personally don't like to say that there's a one specific way to do it. I've had clients who are naturally very, very, as I say, tall. And so like you said, they like to arch their low back first. So for clients who that's their immediate instinct is to arch their back in order to bring their shoulder blades down or to pinch their shoulder blades, I almost have them crunch forward in a way to actively engage their abdominals and their core muscles and then lock that position in. So yes, they are slightly crunched forward, but then if they're able to maintain that position and then they start to row or do pull downs, whichever muscle group that we're doing to try and engage the lats, over time, they'll start in a slightly tilted forward position. And then as that core gets stronger, they're able to work their way to where they're seated. They're essentially in a neutral spine position straight up. And then they're going to be in what we'll say the most optimal position for what everyone thinks is a typical row, straight up, pulling the elbow straight back.
I'm not sure if you guys caught that, but he just talked about progression. It's always about progression. You're not just going to get it instantly, right? That's key. You got to work towards it. You got to brace it. You got to analyze where your body is currently. How are you setting it up? And this goes a lot with mind muscle connection, that mindfulness in the gym, being able to be aware, having that proprioception of where your body is in space. That's huge because that's the first step. That's the fundamental layer. So we would need to work on that. And then from there, keep progressing for these corrective exercises, knowing how to brace yourself and set your body up to lock your spine down in that neutral position to where we can really load that lat. That's perfect.
Kind of going off what Josh was saying, I would honestly start with core as like an injury prevention thing too. So doing that before every back day would be important. Having that strong core is what's going to prevent some postural instabilities. So when you have that strong core, you're going to be, like Josh was saying, upright in that neutral spine. But also, like when your core is weak, smaller muscles in your back, like your QL, will start to take over, and those get strained really easily. So if your core isn't strong enough to hold that upright position, the smaller muscles take over, and those are really prone to injury. So keeping that core strong is going to help with these injuries later on.
So key. So what do you say would be some good warm-ups that we can give these guys? Warm-ups to activate the core and strengthen it.
I mean, again, I think a lot of it depends on our athletes or our clients' ability level. I mean, if they kind of meet them where they're at, if you get an advanced bodybuilder like yourself, Dylan, and he's coming in because you got 24 weeks to a show and you're trying to fine tune things, obviously the trainer or your coach's approach is going to be a lot different than if, let's say, you're getting someone who's doing their first bodybuilding show and they're not incredibly experienced. I mean, I would tend to start with just basic planks, basic plank, side plank on the elbows, and then you can progress from there to bird dogs, dead bugs, any sort of those exercises. I mean, that would be the approach that I take. Dusty might have a little bit more of a systematic approach from his background, but that's just where my mind immediately goes.
Yeah, and that's definitely good for like the hiring but someone who's like new at it, which is a lot of kind of like what I work with. So I would say, just starting with those core contractions, getting that anterior pelvic tilt first, working on that to contract the core. And then from there, kind of building up to like bridges. But an important part of that is breathing too. I feel like people forget about breathing. Your diaphragm is part of your core. So you want to make sure that you're continuously breathing as you do these core exercises too.
That's huge. Most people, I know myself, I was never taught how to breathe because we don't need to really be taught how to breathe, right? You know, where it's something we just naturally do. We don't even think about it. But that goes along with mindfulness, you know, being mindful. And what I mean by that, I guess specifically, is being extremely, extremely present in this moment, completely aware of what's going on, feeling your breath, right? Being able to control your diaphragm, expand it and contract it, and control your core in that sense too. I know a lot of my clients have been looking and searching to get a tighter stomach. And the number one thing I always tell them to start, focus on your breathing. Get that in. I do that same thing with them. I have them put the anterior tilt in the pelvis and then focus on contracting that core through breathings, through inhales and then deep exhales like that. And I've seen a lot of success with that, just in my own personal as well, for my clients as well. What do you guys think from expanding, especially, here's a good question. How then should we breathe when we're doing a plank? You know, do you have position wise, is there any setup technique or anything you guys think would be good to share for how to set that up and how to really maintain a strong core while you're breathing in these exercises?
I would say, depending on how, like, I know for me, when obviously we all played grade school, middle school, probably high school sports, like when we're doing regular planks, you're just kind of holding it there. Like you don't really actively think about contracting your core. And so at some point, you got to think about, just when you're in that top position, elbows on the ground, and your toes are up, or toes are on the ground, if we're talking about a regular plank, you got to think about actively trying to, I like to tell my clients, think about crunching your elbows to your toes. Think about trying to pull your elbows to your toes. And that's going to, A, contract your core, but B, it's going to naturally flatten out that lumbar spine, which I don't know about you guys, but I've seen it plenty of times where as people start to fatigue with those, we'll call them standard planks, the low back starts to arch, the hips start to dip. And the plank is not going to be able to be held as long, but that's a good thing. That's because they're working the entire core top to bottom, we'll say.
That's huge. About how you're doing it, not just doing it. That's another very important thing here. Awesome. And these are all going to help you with your row, help you with building your back. You know, the core is such a fundamental thing. So just as you're listening to this, guys, make sure you really understand these are things that need to be done, almost like, if you will, brushing your teeth. You know, we don't really like to do it all the time, but it's still something we all do because we know it's something that needs to be done. And core exercises are those things that need to be done, non-negotiables, every week, every day, almost, you know, just doing what would you say, moving on from that, guys, then the actual contraction of the lat, what would you say are some good tips for strengthening that contraction and through form?
I mean, I think, just it does take time to get that mind muscle connection of the lats. I think it'll take time for everyone, but working on, like, I know I talk about this a lot, but it is a big thing for me. Like the parascapular muscles are huge. They play a part in all movements of your upper extremity. So like focusing on like even your rhomboids, because when you're doing a pulling motion, your scapula is going to do like a downward rotation. Okay, so like your rhomboids play a part in that. So doing like the upright rows, like where you're standing and you're trying to pinch your scaps together, so bringing your shoulder blades together, that kind of helps focus on like the movement you need for your lats. And that's kind of going to be like the first step to building that mind muscle connection. And those rhomboids are also a muscle that typically are weak in most people. So working on those is also going to help prevent injury too. But learning like how to pinch your scap together like correctly. And then also it's going to be that same thing about posture. Trying to keep your shoulders back, your chest up, is going to be important for that too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I
Yeah.
know with a lot of with my clients when I teach this as well, just being there with them, and even myself going through this process, you should always have that mental thought process of you're not just doing the movement, how you should focus on how you're doing it, right? And what Dusty said, focusing on knowing how the movement should look, how it should feel, then you can visualize that. Because let's be honest, the back is extremely hard to train. Because you can't see it. You can look in the mirror and see every other muscle group moving, and you can kind of gauge your form and see what needs to be tweaked based on that. But when you're talking about back, you can't see anything, right? So it's even more important to focus in on that mind muscle connection. You'll see me in the gym closing my eyes and really keeping my chest driven high and really driving my shoulder down as I pull the lat and contract and try to feel and visualize each fiber shortening and then lengthening as it stretches. Visualizing my shoulder blade going through that movement, just like Dusty said, where you retract it and pull it down and then comes back up in that sense. Having these visuals is going to only help you build that mind muscle connection. It's another very key component as well. Not a lot of people talk about, but maybe do subconsciously in a sense.
Yeah. And I think too, one thing that I've noticed, and again, this is more from personal experience rather than like research and data driven. I found that a lot of clients, if you start them in a neutral grip position, so palms facing each other, that's going to be exactly. They're going to be much stronger in that position first. So you're going to be able to overload your rows earlier on. And so therefore, as that gets stronger, then you can start to play with different grips, whether it's supinated, pronated, or neutral. And then you can start to work, okay, are we going to go supinated, close grip, supinated rows? Are we going to go medium grip, supinated rows? Like you can start to tweak the type of grip and the arm width, we'll say, and then depending on how much you feel it, depending on the orientation of your arms, where they are, neutral or close, wide, neutral or wide, can also play a part in where you feel it.
Yeah.
So most people are I think we can probably agree, all three of us, that like if you put someone close grip and supinated, so the arms are really tight, and then we drive down and back, you're probably going to feel it a lot more in your lats, in your rhomboids, than if you start someone with a really wide grip and we'll say pronated or neutral, just because of the anatomy of how the lat, where the lat works, the orientation of the radius or our biceps or our triceps and so on.
That's huge. That's so key, guys. That's very important. Where you set your arms up, how you set your body up is going to determine really how you activate your back, what muscle groups you contract. Like you said, driving those elbows in, neutral or supinated grip, pulling back and driving down at the same time, back and down, you're going to activate more lats. And then, like you said, wide grip, that's more upper back. You're going to get more traps, rear delts, rhomboids in that sense. So understanding that you really are not going to target your lats by having a super high and wide grip, right? The closer, the better. The more isolated in the lats, the more activation in the lats, really. So this is huge, guys. Understanding what exercise is designed for which muscle. Whenever we set up exercises, I'm sure you guys can agree, right? With your clients, you don't just set up to do the same type of row in just a different way, right? You don't go from a barbell bent over row to a seated row to a machine seated row, doing the same grip, doing those three exercises. That's just doing the same thing as overkill. You're not training every aspect of the back, of the strength curve for the back. In order to develop a full back for hypertrophy, especially for bodybuilding focus, through research and through my personal testimony here, the best way to do it is to set up where you're training all these different angles, right? The back can be contracted by pulling straight down, by pulling this way, pulling in front of you, pulling up, and then shrugging in that sense. All of this whole spectrum, there's different angles where the back contracts. We have to make sure we're training every single angle in that strength curve. So setting up your workouts for that, that's why we set up the workouts the way we do. We're optimizing muscle growth. It's not just doing the same thing over and over and over. We're maximizing it, making it most efficient as possible in a short amount of time as possible as well. That's very huge, guys. So make sure with your workouts, with how you're training, understanding that the setup is set up on purpose, and make sure to be conscious of that and mindful of that as you're going through the process as well. That's good, guys. So what do you feel after the workout? Because this is something a lot of us miss. We go in and then we just do our workout and then we just leave. We don't do anything else. How bad is that? Like, I'm not sure if anybody realizes it, but that's so bad. That's so bad because you're just missing out. You're leaving stuff on the table. So having a proper warm up and cool down is a very, very key component as well to building your back, to strengthening your lats, and to fixing your posture, which is going to fix everything else as well. So what, guys, specifically, do you have any good cool down exercises, stretches? Dusty, you got anything in that sense?
Yeah, so like, well, let's just talk, well, I'll talk about warm up real quick first. Like warm up, you don't want to do like stretches necessarily. You want to do more like dynamic stuff, because when you stretch, you're lengthening that muscle. And what we've learned is that you're actually losing a little bit of strength after you stretch, like within an hour time frame. So you want to try to do your stretches as a cool down. So like back especially, we get these rounded shoulders usually because our pecs or our pec minor is tight. So I always suggest like you could just go in a doorway, do some pec stretch, and that's going to really help, bring the shoulders back, especially if those are tight. So doing those static stretches, you want to do more so as a cool down than as a warm up.
Cool.
Yeah, I think too, I know the majority of my business is in person, so I only have like a flat hour, or my sessions run 55 minutes. So it's a little bit different if you're having a coach train you versus you're going in on your own. I agree that for a cool down, yeah, you definitely want to do more stretches, back days. Yeah, maybe like, I guess we'll say downward dog or child's pose, arm across your chest. I personally don't think it needs to be something crazy, outlandish. Just something simple, just to kind of give your body a way to go from, you're stressing the body while you're working out. You're breaking it down, a 5-minute stretch, just to kind of remind the body, hey, like we're done. It's time to cool down. It's time to relax, get into that, I guess we'll say parasympathetic state where we're now in a rest and digest mindset rather than, if we're talking about a fight or flight response.
Yeah.
I think that, and keep it simple too, like a 5-minute stretch, like Dusty said, walking on the treadmill for 5 minutes or going on the elliptical just to kind of cool things down, keep the blood moving if it's a leg day. But upper body days, I don't think you really need to go too crazy with your cool downs. But again, that's just kind of my personal opinion, my personal testimony.
Yeah, I agree on that, man. Whatever you can do consistently, that's huge. Doesn't help you, if you just do it once. There's a saying goes, one good meal doesn't help you, just like one bad meal won't hurt you. It's the consistency for whichever way you go. And it's the same cool downs and workouts, right? You can train really hard one day and then miss for another month. It's not going to help you. You have to stay consistent, guys. Be consistent. Focus and understand that this is a process. It's a journey. It takes a daily commitment to persevere and push through. Yeah, that's good, guys. Good. Well, you guys got any final thoughts on this? Anything you want to add right in the end here? And then we'll open it up for some questions.
I would probably say just, kind of to bring everything full circle, like Dusty said, like make sure you get a proper warm up. you want to keep things loose. You want to keep things fluid. So biggest thing is probably just like raise your body temperature, activate muscles that you want to be working during that workout, probably mobilize the joints that are going to be working those muscles. If you're doing more of like a bodybuilding type split, obviously I work with a ton of athletes. So like I would add some kind of potentiation effect to it. Small light end plyos, depending on what kind of day. And then from there, just keep in mind about what muscles you're working. I mean, like you said, Dylan, rows, the lats and the rhomboids are going to be able to be worked at a bunch of different angles. Don't think about trying to hit every single angle in every workout, but if you got 5 angles to work the lats, okay, you got 5 different programs or 3 different programs, and make sure you're hitting 1 to 2 angles each and every time you go into the gym for your pull day or your back day, however you want to program it. Make sure you're hitting the different angles. And over time, you're going to find out, okay, yeah, like when I do this type of row, I feel it way more in my lats than this. Okay, well then maybe you don't program that type of row in as much, because that's becoming a very dominant part of your training program. Again, we want to build a nice, well-rounded physique. So eventually you're going to have to start working on your quote unquote weak points. Okay, I don't feel it in my lats as much when I do this row. Well, probably time to start emphasizing that row over the ones that you feel it in a little bit more.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was going to end on. Just they have their own individual approach, and everyone's going to feel it differently in different ways. I know, like when I work out with people, I'll have them try something like, I feel it so much when I do this, and then they do it and they don't really feel it in their lats. So it's going to be based on how you feel it. Kind of like how we were talking, maybe you have your palms up and you're supinated and you just feel it too much in your biceps. So then you go to a pronated palm down and you feel it more in your lats. So just overall, it's going to be an individual approach, and that's something that does take time. So just keep trying ways that we kind of talked about today and see what works best for you individually.
Yeah, absolutely. And the biggest thing, guys, what Josh said, Dusty said, emphasized on it as well, making sure you focus in on your weak points, right? We're not always going to focus on the strengths. In order to really grow, not just with physical, but the mental as well, the mental aspect of all this, because we're not just training to build muscle. Ultimately, we're training to become better, to build better versions of ourselves, physically and mentally, and spiritually and emotionally as well. Now, focus on your weak points are going to help you fully develop a fully well-rounded symmetrical physique, and you're going to gain so much confidence in yourself, in your abilities, because you're not going to shy away from the things that suck, the things that you're not good at. You're going to tackle them. You're going to go steer at them head first, and you're going to eat the frog, right? So to say, you do the hardest thing first. You do what sucks first. That way you become better at it, and everything else just falls into place. Focus on your weak points, turn them into strengths. That's the key, guys.